Hey everybody, this is Jonathan Crow. I am Director of Content and Community at Ninja One, and welcome back to another MSP Live Chat. Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to see all the folks, familiar faces in the crowd. JP, Graham, good to see you guys. Happy New Year, everybody. It's been a heck of a start to 2022, aka 2020 time, the third go around. Guys, we got a great chat with you today, though. Really excited to kick off the live chat series in this way. We have an amazing guest. We've got Tom Watson, our channel chief advisor, back in action. Tom, you and I were talking before about this particular session. We were both excited about it. But hey, Happy New Year. It's good to have you back. Good to see you.
Yeah, Jonathan, a couple things. One thing, I'm really excited about this, and I wish there was something like this around when I sold my MSP, because I'm already seeing the value of what we're going to talk about here. And just one more thing, Wolverine is on hiatus for now. He's likely to be back. I don't know when, but the chops are gone. No more tank top. We'll see though.
You clean up nice. Yeah. Wolverine, he takes a winter break, goes into some kind of like hibernation or something like that. But everyone, if this is your first live chat that you're attending from Ninja, you'll see that this is an informal structure here. We really want this to be conversational. This is your chance to get access to some really smart folks like the man I'm about to introduce you to, and ask tons of questions. It's also your chance to interact with each other. We want to hear from you guys. I mean, we're going to be talking about resolutions to kick things off, but also in a bigger sense, your growth planning. And we've got a lot to say about this. This is a topic that we've covered just recently. A few months back, we covered M&A and what you need to do to kind of get your MSP on track to that, whether it's something in the near future or way out in the horizon, just thinking about your exit planning. And also shorter term in the annual, what are you guys doing to get your MSP on track to hit growth targets? And other just personal development targets that you have for the year. So love that you're all here. Matt Fox bringing the snacks as usual. Guys, if you have any resolutions that you're taking on that you want to share with the group, I would love it if you would put them in the chat. And maybe, Tom, we can hear one from you too. But before we go any further, I should absolutely introduce our guest. Guys, we're really lucky that he's here. I've really enjoyed getting to know him and having a conversation with him. Really smart guy, helping out MSPs really plan out their growth in a thoughtful way that really contrasts with some of the other things I've seen out there that are all focused on growth hacks and going to the moon and everything. Chris takes a very thoughtful, well-researched way about it, and he's got a ton of experience. So Chris Ryan, sorry. From Growth Achievement Partners. Why don't you introduce yourself? Say hello to the crowd.
Hello, crowd. And Jonathan and Tom, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, Jonathan, don't worry about the last name. I've been called worse. But hopefully not after this call. But it's great to be here. I'm certainly aware of what Ninja is doing, and in particular, really impressed with the community that you guys are building there and the things that you're bringing to your community, like the other resources that you've developed, I think is commendable, admirable. I think it's exactly what partners are looking for out of their partners. So thanks for allowing me to join and participate today. And I look forward to adding some insight, hopefully some value, and keeping your streak alive with bringing really good content.
Oh, man. Well, thank you for that. You can see why we had him on. He knows how to butter us up. No, Chris, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Folks, we have an agenda doc for you. And as you've seen, our agenda doc, this is not written in stone. These are our suggestions more than concrete directions here. But if you jump in that, I dropped a link in the chat. And this is your resource that you get to keep and take away. We've got a ton of additional resources. And so not only is this going to kind of lay out the talking points that we've got here and give us some guidance that I'll try to keep us on in terms of the conversation, we also at the bottom have links to a ton of different resources. And one of the resources I want to call out right off the bat, we got our little funny GIF about resolutions here. We can totally touch on that. It's the new year, right? It already feels like 2022 has been a month or 2 months for me, not just 2 weeks. But everyone talks about resolutions. It's this funny, like, kind of like fake new start to everything, right? Like the new year magically creates a new restart to things when it's really just continuations. But that said, there's all this focus on okay, what can we do? What can we start new? What new habits can we make? What are our new goals? There's also something I want to share parallel. Man, these have been insane years. I know everybody's feeling it. I know everybody in the chat has been feeling it, and we should acknowledge that. If you're feeling burnt out, or if you have team members who are feeling burnt out, you're definitely not alone there. I mean, that's something that everyone's struggling with. And I just wanted to drop a link to a guide that we put together that collects resources. So this is something that you can check out, that you can share with your team. I'm not going to scroll through the whole thing here, but it's a guide that kind of goes through burnout symptoms, and then more importantly, shares a ton of different resources and links and some suggestions. And it's really based on conversations that we've had with our partners and folks here. And so hopefully that'll be helpful for you guys. So I wanted to drop that in the chat before we go further with anything else. Oh yeah, Dom's already beat me to it. Thank you so much, Dom, in the background for doing that. Okay, so with that said, let's just go ahead and get into why is Chris here. And Chris is here because he's a lovely guy who says good things about us, but also because he's going to set the record straight here. Tom, you and I were talking about this morning before kind of getting ready for this live chat. And when we hear about growth, growing your MSP, a lot of the things I see focused on, we see like all the emails from Channel E2E, where it's like, oh yeah, another MSSP was acquired, a multi-million-dollar acquisition, all that stuff. We see all these large numbers, and we see specific benchmarks that may apply to some cases, but not all others. And so I think back to the live chat that we had a few months ago, all around mergers and acquisitions. We had some great guests on. They were MSP Corp. They were based out of Canada. And they had some metrics here that they look at. If you want to be acquired as an MSP, right? They're looking at you to have at least $500K in annual EBITDA. And then a 15 to 20% EBITDA margin. We're looking at like, multi-million dollars in ARR coming in. They want 80% of your revenue to come from MRR, 90% annual customer retention. They want you to have no single customer accounting for more than 25%. They want you to have a large/highly profitable addressable market, standardized technology stack, all these criteria that they look at, right? And when we had that live chat, I think all these numbers are great. And Tom, you made the point, especially even if you're not anywhere close to these numbers currently today, it's kind of helpful to have this in your roadmap. To look, okay, well, what can I do to start breaking this down and start moving toward this? But that said, Alex Farling from Lifecycle Insights, frequent guest of the show and a great community member, he got in touch with me and said, hey, I want to make sure this isn't discouraging for folks. And this is just a small section of really the MSP community. I would love to see you guys address the fact that there's plenty of opportunities, what I've highlighted here, that not hitting these big stratospheric numbers for a lot of folks, it doesn't mean you can't achieve a good business and that you can't have a valuable business. And he directed me to someone to talk about this. And that person is here with us now. So this is Chris. So Chris, I reached out to you. We had a conversation about this. I wonder, before we get into some of the things we want to really focus on today, if you want to respond to that a little bit. When you're talking with the MSPs that you work with, do you see that kind of being the mindset that there's really only this one path to growth? It's private equity acquisition. I need to hit these exact numbers to succeed. Is that a mindset that's going around? Yeah,
I mean, if you brought that list back up in a vacuum, there's nothing to argue with. We don't live in a vacuum. So depending on how you look at it or what matters, that's a list. That's certainly not the only list, and that's not to discredit whoever created the list, because like I said, there's things on there that are really good guidance, but they're not necessarily absolutes. So I guess what I'd start with is maybe a couple of things. The first one is just to give the group some context. So since 2010, I co-founded this firm that I run called Growth Achievement Partners, focused primarily in 3 areas. I do business coaching and consulting and peer group administration for MSPs. I do MSP M&A. I've done a couple of dozen of those deals, and I do MSP exit planning, which frankly, I hate the fact that it's called exit planning. It should really be called business planning. There's an exit in it somewhere, inevitably for everyone. But anyway, that's what I do. So I say that to let you know that I literally spend 100% of my time in this space and really focused on and intentionally and passionate about what we call the smaller end of the MSP market, the mass majority yet widely underserved, the 8 million and under, 5 million and under, maybe those businesses that can't get to private equity attraction kind of thing. But that PE thing, that's a conversation for a different day, but that's not the be all end all. And I think that was the question. So in the larger context, I want to bring, hopefully kind of make 4 points and then give one contribution, if I could, at the end of the presentation today. And the first point is one I kind of already mentioned. I'm assuming there's mostly, but not all, business owners on the call today. Congratulations for owning your businesses, for being entrepreneurs. There's lots of people then on the call that are probably supporting those people as well, right? So everybody inevitably is going to exit the business one day. You're going to transition out of it. And whether that's you leave it to your children, you sell it to your employees, there's an acquirer, you hang a gone fishing or gone golfing sign on the door, you will not be there. But what we're going to talk about today matters regardless of when or how that event happens. Hopefully, you will be in control of that event when it does. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, but hopefully you'll be in control of that. So if you're a business owner, there's going to be things that are germane, helpful to your business that we're going to talk about today. And if you're an employee for a business owner, there's things that are going to help him or her, but also help you. The quality of business that you're working in those things should matter to you as an employee as well. So that's the first point. The second point is, yes, growth matters, but there are more categories to growth than just MRR or just revenue. Like I might be, might be hearing somebody say, gosh, you got to grow 20%. But what if that investment in 20% growth creates a 5% reduction in profit? Shouldn't we be growing for profit, or shouldn't we be growing for value, or shouldn't we be growing for sustainability or wealth, or insulating our business from pandemics and economic downturns, right? So maybe there's more to growth than MRR and revenue. Third point is some of you might be thinking, gosh, it's 2022. I'm seeing all these webinars come out. They're all about growth. They're all about MRR. They're all about sales. What if I'm already growing and selling and have good MRR? What could I be doing for my business today? Or what if I put a big emphasis on growth, what if I outkick my technical coverage because I'm struggling with staffing today, right? So maybe hyper growth isn't the best strategic thing for you to do to your business. So I want to try and give you some things that any business, every business could and should do outside of revenue growth. And then I also want to make a point that we'll get to when we get to the end, that it's not all about PE. Whether you're, like I said, planning on making a move today, planning on making a move eventually, wherever it is, there is significant opportunity for the smaller end of the market. And in many cases, it's not retire and go off into the sunset money, but that doesn't mean it's not insignificant. That doesn't mean it can not help fund your retirement, your kids' education, the vacation home you always wanted, provide a nest egg, or funding for you to do the next thing in your life that you want. So don't think that you're unattractive or not valuable if you're not hitting some of these crazy metrics that you see. And then the last thing is I want to give you some visibility into what an accurate appraisal of your business could be today and some of the ways in which that's delivered to you. So that's the kind of the 4 points, the long answer to the short question, Jonathan, but that's what I'm kind of hoping to provide visibility and guidance to today.
Oh man, no, that's fantastic. And it really, you did a great job of kind of lining up what we're planning on talking about with those points here. So thank you so much for that, Chris. And
Sure.
Tom, you got kind of fired up about this topic. Of course, a lot of the folks here on this call have been on previous live chats. They know your story, but for those who are new, you want to give a little bit of background and I mean, some of the things Chris was just talking about. You lived through this, selling your own MSP, but you want to give a little background there of kind of where things transitioned for you and how you went about some stuff?
Yeah, let everyone know. I mean, like early 2000s, I basically, started a business on the side, like many people do. I was a contractor working for a government contract in DC area, and started doing work on the side, mainly residential. And I was just doing that for a few years. I mean, we're talking like Yellow Pages ads. I even had a business called Call a Nerd. I mean, this was like just pure lifestyle out of my trunk business. And then I made the decision that I wanted to turn it into something more than a lifestyle business, into a real business I could scale. Changed the name, and then started adding business clients, and then started adding technicians, and then the office space, and all of those things. And I'm going to tell you guys something that bothered me the whole time. And people always wanted to know what your gross revenue was, and I couldn't understand it. But I know that we're conditioned that way because that's how we judge these big corporations, which is unfortunate. Also, is how much money more are you doing year over year? And I would refuse to answer the question. I would tell people, I mean, who cares? As long as I'm profitable and I'm more profitable each year, and I'm taking home what I want to take home. Why does it matter, this number? And I'm sure Chris can speak to that as well. But it's something that's always bothered me about kind of the business world and the MSP community. And my thing is that it's very individual, and how you judge your business and how you deem it profitable to you is different for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think one of the great things here is, we have Chris here who works with in the M&A capacity, works with acquisitions and helping those happen. And so, he's able to he's going to be walking us through how some of the things you're talking about, that, these are all individual, and how you actually appraise a business. Yes, there's these broader formulas that you can look to, but there's more to it than that. And so that's one thing that I'm really excited about hearing Chris talk about. So Chris, do you want to get into this a little bit? I mean, what our tagline here for this chat was 4 sales-free ways to boost your valuation. And I've already got a little flack on this for posting this on LinkedIn, and someone saying like, oh man, bad take. I guess let me clarify. We're not saying, as you pointed out, that growth doesn't matter. Not even saying that like sales is evil or sales is bad and not something that you should invest in. Just pointing out that there are other paths for adding value that aren't necessarily tied to that. You want to speak to that a little bit more?
Well, and yeah, I guess I'll go even a little further. You should be growing. You should be selling. Revenue matters. My thought in what we could bring this group was, I've stopped keeping track, but if I haven't gotten 24 invitations to webinars over the last 6 weeks that have been about growing revenue and growing MRR, I haven't gotten any. And I know I've gotten at least 24. So my point is, there's lots of education out on that, and there should be. And there's lots of education out on security and what you should be doing with your clients, and there should be. And there's lots of challenges with staffing and hiring and retaining people, and those are things that you should be doing. We wanted to try and communicate something that maybe people weren't talking about, or like I said, for that portion of the audience. So hopefully somebody doesn't think that because it's not talked about here, that it's not important. It's important. But I'll also tell you, and don't nominate yourselves, right? But Tom, you talked about, the business, and if you kind of look at an MSP landscape, or really any entrepreneurial landscape, and you think about that evolution of species, evolution of man kind of graph, it starts in the lower left where you own your job, and then you have a lifestyle business, and then a business, a company, and then an enterprise, right? Well, most people in this MSP community didn't necessarily start their businesses because they were great salespeople or wanted to sell or wanted to go out and do a lot of cold calling and sell. It's not necessarily a core competency. I'm not saying it's not required. I'm not saying it's unimportant. It's critical, but it might not be a core competency. So for the people on the group that either A, had sales figured out, or are thinking, I'm maybe not great at that, but I've got a going entity here that makes some sense. What can I do today? And like I had mentioned earlier, the third piece was I've talked to MSPs. I've had MSPs that I've brought on as clients. I've had MSPs that we've encountered through buy side, and we've seen lots of people lose lots of money investing in sales only to have it not benefit the business, right? So what are things that are maybe closer to our core competencies that we could do that not only add enterprise value, but make a better run business, which ultimately is a more fun business to run. So that's what we want to talk about when we're talking about these 4 things in particular.
Great. Chris, one thing real quick is that the way I look at that is, and I think you're getting to that point, is there are many ways to build an MSP and to run it and to view it as successful. And Jonathan pointed out already, we're getting all this messaging from various outlets, and I get a pile of emails from someone in particular where I'm like, I have to bite my tongue because, and I want everyone out there to know, and I think you already congratulated them, Chris, you own a business. That's amazing. And what you decide to do with it, as long as it's profitable to you, is great. But there are ways where someone like Chris can teach you that you can focus in on key core areas if you want to later sell that business. And I can tell you, my MSP, once I realized, it was about 7 years before I sold, I realized I wanted to sell. And I started doing many of these things, but not nearly to the degree that Chris is going to go into, that where you got to focus those areas on branding and on your core competencies and your processes and all that. So we're really looking forward to hear that from you, Chris.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Well, then let's jump into it here. Right. And like I said earlier, we don't live in a vacuum, right? But this is contextual in a 45-minute conversation. So again, we wanted to kind of point you to some things. Use the chat, ask questions, but we want to kind of try and point you to these 4 capitals here. And when you think about, again, the components of a business that are valuable, there is revenue, there is MRR. Ultimately, at the end of the day, frankly, the thing that's the most valuable is earnings, because that's when an acquirer would understand when they might get their investment back. So again, not discounting all of those things, but talking about these 4 capitals and this concept around these 4 capitals. Actually, if you could go up, Jonathan, a little bit and just kind of keep the list there for a minute. I think we've got kind of all 4 of them. Might be a little higher up, maybe not.
I think I took that out, but basically,
okay.
Yeah,
all right, gotcha. So I'll talk to them for you so you kind of understand what they are here. But when you think about them, you've got these capitals which are valuable, within the business. They're off P&L, they're off balance sheet, but they have a tremendous impact on the value and the function and the benefits of the business. And the first one is human capital. So that's clearly like your team, right? So when you're thinking about your human capital, what kind of things can you be doing to invest in retention, productivity, culture? Your structural capital then, and I'm going to come back and kind of go through some examples of these. Your structural capital are your processes, your onboarding, your scoping, your migration capabilities, your intellectual property. I saw in the chat earlier, Dan Comis, hopefully I got your last name right, but you had a note about re-onboarding all of your clients and probably looking at them against the stack, and do we have the right information that we have in the clients? That's an investment in structural capital. It's also probably an investment in human capital, because by re-onboarding, you'll probably see missing documentation or other things that you need to have in place and might make the team more efficient. That's a great example of an investment in structural capital. Customer capital, your relationships, right? So multiple levels of those relationships, being viewed as a trusted advisor versus the IT guy, generating business outcomes. There was a great article last year that talked about, being a wealth manager versus a day trader and thinking about kind of that approach, if you will, with your clients. So those are investments in your customer capital and your social capital, which is your brand, the name in your local market, the education that you deliver. Look at, as again, what Ninja is doing, the way in which they're building their brand in their community. Are you a community advocate, and not just a community advocate like within the MSP community? Are you a community advocate like locally? There's lots of MSPs who are incredibly philanthropic and charitable. Do you have vertical market expertise? So those are kind of the capitals in which you can seek to make, well, frankly, non-sales investments in. Those are things that we are likely pretty good at doing if we had the time, made the time, dedicated the time, that would add tremendous customer value, employee value, ownership, life balance value, and has transferable wealth value. When you look at, or when I look at, you don't look at these a lot, but you might look at your business. I'm looking at lots of P&Ls all the time on behalf of buyers and sellers and people I'm consulting to, and looking at what the numbers say. The numbers are what they are. It's the numbers that the story tells about the business that's important. And when you look at like businesses that really prospered through 2020, Yes, most of you should have benefited from a mass migration to work from anywhere. And your clients needed to come to you and buy hardware and acquire security that they didn't have before and do migration projects. But the value or the reason that they came to you is probably more attributable to your human capital and your structural capital and your customer capital and your social capital than it was any widget that you had in place. And there was certainly lots of new widgets that came out. But the reason we would see an MSP prosper versus fail through 2020 has more to do with those four capitals than the magic sauce they might have had because they had the best backup device or the best this or the best that just didn't play in. So you could see how these things add value. So I want to pause here for a second, either for questions from Tom or Jonathan or from the group about what these are. And then we're going to just kind of walk into some of the things that you can do for each of these, because as I mentioned earlier, having a higher quality of these 4 C's, yes, it increases your value. It lowers your risk. It's a better business to run and a better business to work in. So why wouldn't we invest some time and energy in these things? And it doesn't take much.
I have a quick question, Chris. I don't know if anyone else is thinking this, but you obviously help companies with this and help them sell their business. You look at these things and you probably score them in some way, but do you also offer consulting services for this kind of thing?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I do. Thanks for the softball, Tom. Others do. There's lots that do. There's lots of peer groups out there. As I mentioned before, there's lots of free resources and guidance. Where I add value is I see a lot of the resolutions as I've been kind of walking over here has been a lot working out and doing marathons and 10Ks and push-ups. In some cases, I'm an accountability partner. I'm a workout partner. I'm the one that helps kind of taskmaster you. And I'm also a perspective guy. The biggest value I think oftentimes that I bring to my clients, like you were talking about earlier, Tom, no two businesses are exactly alike. This MSP model today is certainly, there's more knowns there than there are unknowns about the levers that you can push or pull to make the business, more profitable or more efficient or do things. So there's a lot of that there, but helping businesses come up with individualized plans that make sense to them. There's multiple ways to skin a cat, right? Somebody might say, hey, I want to do this, or I want to do that. The perspective I can give is like, okay, well, there's maybe 3 courses of action, A, B, or C. Here's the pros and cons of each. Based on that, what decision do you make? And then here's the things we want to do and things we want to avoid. But again, there's lots of people out there that are capable of doing that.
Yeah, I think where I was getting at was like when I decided I wanted to sell my business eventually, I was at a point, and this is like 8 years ago at this point, I had to try to figure this stuff out. And then I'm wondering, do they engage you when they're ready to sell, or does someone who's like years out go, hey, I need a plan?
Yeah,
do this. Let me talk to this guy.
That's a great question. If you're dealing with a business broker, they're probably not going to want to talk to you until you're ready. There's really nothing there for them. Get your financials ready. Tell me when you're ready to sell. I'll have a 2-hour conversation with you about what makes your business special, and then I'll go out and market you. But as I mentioned before, exit planning, which really has a bad name, it's really just frankly good business planning that just comprehends your exit. And in particular within that exit, what you want to do post-acquisition. Gosh, the statistics are crazy on how many owners regret selling. And it's not because they regret selling the business or they didn't get the financial piece that they wanted. It's they didn't really have a plan for what they were going to do after their sale. So this whole exit planning thing is good business planning and strategy that's maximizing transferable value, building wealth for you as an owner. And then in particular, the third leg of the stool is understanding what I'm going to do after my transition. And exiting doesn't mean leaving. Look at you, Tom, you left your business, but you didn't leave the space. There's lots of acquirers today who are looking for those owner operators who are looking to shed some things that they don't like to do and really put their shoulder into the things that they do like to do, stay on, be a part of something bigger, looking for long-term relationships. The well-intended buyers today aren't looking to war profiteer. They're not looking to strip out your business. I mean, like I said, there's just so many more scenarios, but unfortunately the picture gets conveyed, one way, but it's only a slice of the picture. But if you're going to do that kind of work, 3 years in advance of your exit is a minimum of what you need to look at, because you're going to need to get your financials in order and maybe go back historically and do some not cleanup work on the results, but cleanup work on the chart of accounts or being able to understand and normalize some things. There is, business value that you need to look at when we go into the calculator and look at some things. So it takes some work, but it's not a full-time job. The other thing, and just the last part about it, like I said before, and I don't mean to be that guy as we're optimistic in 2022 and moving in, but 87% of businesses sell because of one of the 5 Ds. That's why they go to sale. And unfortunately, they're all negative. It's death, divorce, disability, disagreement with partners, or disintermediation. You're just, you get outflanked by your deal. So like I had said earlier, if you're fortunate enough to time your exit, then say, I'm going to do it 2 weeks before I'm ready to go. But most of us are not going to be that fortunate, and we should probably have a plan in place.
Yeah, man, kind of a sobering thought there, but I mean, a realistic one, right? An important one. And actually, I do want to make a note that I think that flows into some other things I wanted to address maybe at the end here. I know I want to get into these the 4 capitals and ways that people can actually work on those. But you are going to be addressing, I did have some questions about M&A larger trends that you and I had talked about a little bit. We can talk at the end of this. Sure. And I do want to remind folks here on the call that we are going to be getting into a calculator that Chris has thoughtfully provided that shows you an approach to getting some rough appraisal numbers that take into account these 4 capital numbers and kind of value that they could add. So that's going to be really cool. But before we do that, I'll call attention. People have already discovered it on their own. Thank you for people who have voted. But we have a polls option down here at the bottom. We asked you some questions. I just added a new one, actually. But first of all, just how bullish are folks for this year? And here I go. I start off the chat being like, oh, man, another 2020. And like, here's a link for people who are burnt out. But you know what? Cool to see this. Folks on the call here, optimistic about this year. We got the majority of people giving 2022 a 4 out of 5 on the bullish scale. So that's cool to see. And be interested in the chat. If you have any more you want to share, the people who did vote optimistically, why? Like what specifically are you feeling confident about? And then looking at the biggest priority, acquisition, right? This is not a surprise. Everybody needs more clients. But Chris, I think this gives us a good transition into, okay, sure, you acquire more clients. Are you actually set up to service those clients? Do you have the team that you need to? Do you have, if we go up to your list here, do you have the human capital, the structural capital? The social capital obviously plays a role into that. And so I just wanted to call that into place. And actually, if we look at that third poll here, we have what do folks need the most help in? And thank you everyone for voting actively right now live. We can see that structural capital is kind of running away with it. That people need help with their processes, which is actually for us, for Ninja, I think that's maybe the area that we can help out the most in. So that's good for us to know. But why don't I'll steer this back to you, Chris, and why don't we dive into talking about that as if your goal is client acquisition, you want to grow aggressively. You talked about capital, adding value, but also de-risking a business. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean when you're talking about human capital? What makes a good team, or what gives human capital high value in terms of like de-risking a business when you're looking at it from an M&A perspective?
Yeah, so I will answer that question. Just a quick note on that client acquisition piece. Don't have to ask it now, but if I were consulting and having a conversation with somebody that asked that, I would say, well, what's the real goal of client acquisition? And it might be because I need more profit, I need more MRR, I need more revenue, growth, whatever it is. There might be other ways to do that. New client acquisition is clearly the longest, and most difficult and most expensive, kind of way to go about this. And again, I'm saying this with the understanding. I mean, I've got clients, and we are new client acquisition animals. We've got guys that are bringing on 6 figures worth of new MRR per year. So again, I do not discount that, but I understand everything that goes into that. But if the answer to that is I'm needing new profit or I'm needing more MRR, then there might be additional ways to do that, like, going and getting stack alignment, or, upgrading traditional antivirus to, newer antivirus. Or again, there just might be other ways to get that. So think about that. But back to your question, when you look at what's the value of human capital and being a team or building a team, I'll give you an example of one that's actually happening right now. So I have a client that's a traditional office equipment dealer, so a copier company. A number of years ago, I helped them buy a platform MSP, nice $6 million MSP, big enough to be a platform over a number of states. They're still growing that business. It's great. But we're talking to somebody now who the two most significant bits of value for the buyer on this business have nothing to do with profitability, nothing to do with sales, and nothing to do with sales growth. It's got everything to do with the fact that they've got 10 technicians spread between, field tech, level 1, help desk, level 2, level 3, VCIO, that all have greater than 3-year tenure within the organization. So they've got a team of individuals that understand how to deliver MSP services, technology services. They're good at it. They're efficient in it. And they happen to be comparatively high on the security curve, particularly in some compliance areas that my client is not. The biggest value driver of this business for my client and the seller is the team. They've got a really good team that understands how to deliver services. I mean, most MSPs, I don't know about the call that you're on today, need additional people. Unfortunately, maybe they lost people. They're having to pay more for the people that they have. If they're replacing people, they're likely having to replace them at a higher payroll than they were before. There's tremendous value in acquiring talent, right? I mean, that's going to be the ROI on this deal for the buyer, is the talent. So if you're able to, foster and develop a good team, that's incredibly attractive to a buyer. Should also be incredibly attractive to you as an owner today and or an employee. I've got this same client that is the buyer. We're also doing a big project on making sure we're documenting the current state training, certification, education levels, and then development and career paths for all their technical staff at every level. What are the certifications and trainings that you need to get that we're going to deliver? What's the pay escalation and scale for you? What's your path to getting to other areas? So building out individual development plans, team development plans, certifications, training, those types of things, they have tremendous value to the business you're running, as well as the business you would leave or transition to somebody else. So hopefully that gave you some examples you were looking for there, John.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and I'm sure that there's a lot of we can go down a lot of rabbit holes there with specific expertise and certifications, all that sort of thing. But in the interest of time, because I know we got some more good resources we want to share, I think we can move on. Yep. But definitely some other questions I'm interested in.
Well, and you mentioned it, the structural capital thing. If your constituents, if your partners, if your users, or if the people that are not partnered with you today and are considering about it, Jonathan, I think you got a link in there to some of the ways in which Ninja is helping with automation of workflows and documentation. Those things provide significant value. So make sure you invest some time, group, in looking at those things. Automation is a big opportunity in 2022 and beyond for MSPs.
Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else, Tom? I know you're active in the chat right now, but I'll pick on you for a second. The structural capital part of it, the processes part of it. When you were building out your business, anything you want to add to that part of it? Kind of like investments that you made there. I mean, I'm sure you ended up investing kind of across the board. But when you look at these 4 things: human capital, structural, adding to your relationships, and then also your branding too. I mean, was there one of those things that you really kind of prioritized?
Well, yeah, I kind of ended up in a situation about like 6-7 years in where I kind of run my business into a hole a little bit because I had great people, but I did not have the processes and the right software in place. And I mean, this is early days. I mean, this is about 2007 or so. This is kind of the early days of PSAs and RMMs. Those were just kind of coming online. And that was like a big piece for me, is I had to step back, and I had these great technicians, but we were using like SharePoint for some things and spreadsheets, and regular Outlook calendars. It was nuts, and it wasn't scalable. And by stepping back and putting those systems in place, PSA and then RMM, then we were able to then begin adding clients at a much faster rate and onboarding them. Because prior to that, we had a problem bringing on new clients. We just didn't have the structure in place to do so.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone there. Just I was slacking with another MSP owner who I won't name, but yeah, another great guy in the community. And he was saying, they have invested heavily in sales, their sales operation. They're bringing on a ton of clients. They're doing great that way, but ops didn't really keep up with it, and it's a little painful for them right now. So they are experiencing the growing pain.
I'm looking at the poll here, Jonathan. Yeah, we've got 13 votes for structural capital.
Right.
You're most helpful. And then, I resonate with that, and that maybe is where a lot of people are. Maybe people can chime in on the chat too of kind of what pieces they think they need to add in terms of that structural capital, because I definitely see that, especially in those probably first 5 years of a MSP, that you can really get stuck with that kind of situation where you can't keep up operationally with what you could possibly do sales-wise or technically.
We look at people in the chat here. We've got Ray and Sean, both from OIT, and Ray is the documentation king. He's constantly preaching about documentation. Chris, are those things that you're looking at when you're helping MSPs with appraisals? That's something like documentation, the types of software they're using, their processes. Can you be a little bit more detailed about that?
Yeah. So scalability is key. Tom talked about it, but let's take something like on how these things might play together, and let's take new client onboarding. Let's say you're historically an MSP that has taken on a client a month or 6 or 8 clients a year kind of thing, and you want to double or triple your sales results. What kind of stress is that going to put on your team if you don't have a really good onboarding process? Probably not going to be great. Or, if you're not good at, migrations, or, you want to start doing more of this, that, and the other, and you're just not good at it. You're going to stress test the business. And maybe some people are saying, I need to improve structurally because they saw some uptick in client consumption in 2021. And they frankly stress tested the business, and they saw where they were maybe a little weak or challenged, or they just couldn't keep up. When you think about, let's talk about it on the other side. Let's think about clients or businesses that you've won over the last 2 years, businesses that you've taken away from other MSPs. What were the reasons that you won that business? It probably wasn't because you had better pricing. It probably wasn't because you had better widgets. It probably wasn't because you had better certifications. You probably communicated better. You probably communicated faster. You probably responded quickly. You probably had a better, more comprehensive program. You probably were able to demonstrate a level of business, operational, structural maturity that they were leaving from, right? So that's how that stuff translates.
Gotcha. Well, let's keep it going here because we only got 15 minutes left, and we want to make sure we can get through that.
Yeah, let's get to the calculator. Let's get to the money shot, right? For anybody that's left, let's get to the money shot.
All right, fair enough. Let's do that. So I'm going to pull this up on the screen. And so, guys, everyone on the call here, this is if you go to that doc that we shared, and I'll go ahead and drop a link into this too, where you can download your own copy of this. But yeah, Chris was able to, this is a calculator that he's come up with. And I thought this was a great job of, my big question when you started talking about these 4 capitals is like, okay, sure. Like, this is something that you look at. These are like the intangibles, right? Like, okay, yeah, they got a good team. That's cool. But what is the actual value that can really add to an appraisal? And this is the answer to it. And so I think this is, Chris, before I step over myself, promising something more on this calculator than maybe what it does. I know that there's some caveats to it too and everything, but basically you want to talk about your intention for sharing this. You hit on it a little bit at the top, but maybe for folks who've just joined.
Yeah. So first and foremost, like I said, I'm passionate about this community, the smaller side, the underrepresented. I have a vision one day that I would love to see the understanding about at least the appraisal value of a business be about as transferable as if I was looking to buy a new home or a car, right? it should be more public than that for both the buyer and the seller. It only helps for better conversations and better understanding. So what you see here and the numbers that you'll see when we kind of get into these approximate multiples and things like that, this is illustrative. It's an appraisal, and there's a difference between an appraisal and a valuation. Conversation for a different day. But if you think about this as like comps in the market, I've been able to put this together through the deals I've done, through the deals that we haven't done, through deals that others have done in community, understanding, trying to read the tea leaves, so on and so forth. So these have been accurate, historically accurate on both the buy and the sell side. The other thing I will say is they're historically accurate primarily around good businesses, right? So you do see that these numbers, if you had if a business that was fiscally challenged, structurally challenged, those types of things, they probably wouldn't command numbers like this. But the idea is this for this to be illustrated. Valuation and appraisal is part science, part art, part fiction, part perception. Again, as another example, let's say I was looking at a house and I ran all the comps in the neighborhood, and then I went to look at a particular house and the basement was unfinished. There's a certain portion of the population that would look at that and say, oh my gosh, basement's unfinished. I don't want to have to deal with that. That devalues the house for me. I might not be interested. Somebody else might say, oh my gosh, it's unfinished. Gives me the opportunity to build the basement I've always wanted, or the workshop I've always wanted, or the in-laws quarters we've always needed, whatever. So that's part of the things. But this is built experientially. Like I said, it is appraisal calculator. So it's supposed to, give you some perception of just a general understanding. So the idea would be is you would put your data into the yellow cells there. So you look at the three kind of primary, and yeah, it's great that we've got the one built up here. So you would put in your total annual revenue. You would put in what your current monthly recurring is, and then you would put in your adjusted EBITDA percentage as it relates to the percentage of earnings you're having off that top line revenue number. So as you see illustrative here, got 1.8 million, 100,000 in MRR today, and 14%, adjusted EBITDA. The value then that you start to look at is you look over to the right to the corresponding column, and it's not built in revenue being the band because revenue matters most. In fact, revenue probably is the least indicator of a business. For instance, let's say I was a business that did 100% of my revenue with one customer that was a government entity, and I was reselling hardware. Probably wouldn't have a ton of profitability, probably would be risks in that business with customer concentration, so on and so forth. But the reason it's in bands like that is, again, think back to that evolution of species. The up to $1 million business, and then when you kind of tip over that and you get to 1 million to 5 million, and you tip over that and you get to kind of the 5 to 8, those are different businesses typically structurally. On the left side, owner operator wearing a lot of hats, probably not as much, organizational structure and development, those types of things. To the right, where you've got just a more mature, built out business. So the reason that you see the multiple values being different are not just because size matters. It's frankly because the bigger the business gets in many cases, the more mature it is and the lower the risk. Buyers aren't always looking for a fiscal deal that, like, how cheaply can I buy this business? What they're looking for is, where's the risk and how can I limit risk in the organization? So that's why you see the numbers be a little bigger there, is because those businesses are typically less risky for a lot of reasons. But what you would do is you put your, information in. The second one there, the annual, the MRR, you would times it by 12. And then what you do is you multiply it by the corresponding column based on the revenue that you're in. Now, a couple of things within this. Again, not all things are created equal, but actually the way this works is when you factor out all of those calculations, the annual revenue, the current MRR, and the adjusted EBITDA, one of the first fleshes you could look at is like, hey, if those numbers are pretty similar, we probably have a pretty well-run business. We probably have an appropriate amount of earnings to revenue. We probably have an appropriate amount of MRR to total revenue, probably getting decent profitability then from that. And if we see that there's huge variations in one or the other, it provides an opportunity to ask questions or to you to look internally and figure out why that number is. But then there's an average across all three of those. If you move down then, like I said, this is a little bit subjective. It's part art, part science, but it's a way in which you could see that there would be value added and or value taken away based on the business. And this is hopefully easy for you to follow. We tried to put the narrative in, but you would score each one of those capitals. And the first thing I want you to notice is there is no average. You're either above average or below average. And kind of to Tom's point earlier, there's lots of industry benchmarks today. Many of you might be in peer groups. You might be, associated and have, members that you're friends with or partners with that you share information in the industry. So you do a little bit of a subjective grading here, but some things you can look at industry data and you would know if you're above or below average in some of these things, right? But the point is you would put in for an appraisal, I'm slightly above or slightly below average. And then they do have a value enhancement or an appraisal enhancement or a deduction, depending on whether you're further to the right or further to the left. What I've put in, and again, this is just typically used for North Star. Different buyers or sellers might value things differently, but essentially, if you're weak, it takes away 5% of that aggregated 3 multiples. And if you're best in class, it would add 5%. Again, could you argue? I probably could, that if I was best in class in like structural capital, that might add 10%. Or there might be a buyer, like I described my buyer today, that heck, they might be looking to add the whole value of the acquisition would be in the fact that they've got really good human capital or really good structural capital. But again, this is intended to be illustrative, but it's historically accurate.
That's great, Chris. I mean, it really gets me thinking about the broader point there that it's just thinking about these things. And like you mentioned, when it comes down to it, there's always it's the matchmaking element, right? Like there's going to be some people who value some things higher than others. But it does get you thinking beyond just these numbers up top to these other factors, which I think is really one of the big points we wanted to get across here. And so my question,
and just lastly, if you looked at them, if you did nothing else other than this, other than kind of just do this exercise for yourself and grade those, whatever that sums up to there on the right under the capitals, in this case, it looks like, it's about $65,000 or $70,000, would be investing 1 hour per week on each of these human capitals every month to make an improvement of them. Would it be worth $70,000 or $80,000 or $90,000 of your time and value over the next year? And the answer would probably be yes, right? It's something that we've got a core competency that we can likely accomplish.
That's a great way to frame it. And my question to you, so looking at these, and I get like the way that you've, again, this is just illustrative, but let's say someone has a strong suit. Would you have a recommendation, and maybe you can't make a broad one here, but would you recommend that someone double down on something they're already, let's take this example right here. We got someone, a fictional MSP that has high human capital. They got a great team. They've got great processes in place. Customer relationships, that's above average too. Their branding sucks. And this is actually, I love that you get this example because this is pretty accurate to like a lot of places. So like, would your recommendation here be like, okay, guys, focus on the team and the process, bump this up to like the world class, the 6th level, versus your branding, like getting that up to the, or are you looking for more like a well-rounded machine here?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I mean, ideally, you'd like all of them to move to as far right as possible, right? But to that point, like, and I'll give a great example. Tom and I, started our conversation, pre this call as we were getting to know each other. He's like, Chris, I didn't even know you existed, right? Frankly. And I do a terrible job of branding and marketing. It's not my interest. I like spending time supporting clients and doing those things. It's not a core competency for me, but where I invest a lot of my time is customer capital and structural capital. I'm really good at repeatable processes that I have because I'm a small business owner and I operate at a pretty high scale. So I know that I've got to improve my social capital, but frankly, I'll probably outsource that. I'll hire that. I'll partner for that to get that accomplished while I'm focusing on the other things. But that's a great question, John.
Chris, in light of that, what makes me think is that maybe something like that doesn't as matter much, like in your situation, or maybe you have an MSP is going up for acquisition and someone is just going to buy the contracts and take the employees over. And so maybe, and not keep the name or any of the brands. So sometimes things like that aren't as important, depending on how you want to grow and where you want to put your emphasis, where in that situation that someone's a buyer of contracts, it's going to be more important to the team and the relationship and the processes. So you're all right. Or maybe that's reverted in some ways, depending on what you're looking to sell and how someone acquires it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and just to champion the branding, because I do think it's important in some cases. On the flip side, maybe you've got your team is rocking, like you are truly in that growth mode because the client load that you've been able to handle them really well. You've ironed out your processes. Your team is specialized in the right places, and you really are looking to put your foot on the gas. And that's where maybe investing in the branding level and getting ramping up the client acquisition can really play a part of it. But yeah, I mean, I just love that this is something that, first of all, is a tool. Everyone loves calculators, right? Like we can jump in. You guys have a link to it in the chat here and also in that Google Doc. So you can download a copy of it, tinker around with it. Chris has also added his email address there. You can reach out to him if you have any questions, if you want to talk to him about any of this stuff, which I recommend doing. And I just love that it gets us thinking about this at this point in the year, right? Like this is the resolution, fresh start of it, planning things out.
I'll also be transparent as we end. So if you want to reach out to me, I say this all the time and I believe it. It's kind of part of my core values. Like I said, I'm dedicated to this space. As a consultant, I've got three things and really three things only. I've got my time, I've got my knowledge, I've got my integrity. I'll give away the first two. I'll never jeopardize the third. I told you my branding is not good. My marketing is not great either. If we have a conversation, I promise you will probably never hear from me again unless you say hear from me again. I'm not going to stalk you. I don't sell lists. I got other things that I'm doing. So I'm not going to be, cyber stalking you if we happen to have a conversation. So take that for what it's worth.
There you go. You're going to be heads down in the other conversations. I like it. Yeah, no, Chris, thank you so much. I mean, we're at the top of the hour. I want to give people an opportunity to take advantage. I mean, everyone on the call here, you've got Chris. If you got questions, feel free to drop in the chat or ask a question. We'll stay on for a couple more minutes here. And while we leave that space, I do want to call out a couple of upcoming things that we've got going on. So I'm going to go back over to our doc here. And Chris, hang tight for just a minute while we give people a chance to ask you some questions. But again, we've got the calculator, you've got the doc. In addition to the calculator, there is a whole lot of additional resources. And some of these are things that we've pulled from previous chats. So kind of going back to that, those, in some cases, depending on where you're at, stratospheric numbers. We did have from the previous chat kind of an outline of like, okay, if you're looking to improve your EBITDA margin, like here's some things you could work on. If you're looking to increase percentage of revenue come from MRR, all those guidelines that we highlighted before, we added a ton of links to things that help you build out an action plan to actually doing some of those things, right? And then, okay, upcoming events. We've got, first, really excited about this. Our next live chat's going to be 2 Thursdays from now, not next week, but the Thursday after. We've got Jay McBain from Forrester joining us, which is an amazing gift for us. It's so great. Jay, as I'm sure a lot of you on the chat know, he is an analyst with Forrester who focuses on the channel. And it's that time of year to make predictions and talk about trends. And so Jay has been thinking about this a lot. He's got some really interesting thoughts about what he sees as big moves coming in the space that are going to impact everybody in macro and also more immediate ways. And so that's what we're going to be talking about a couple of weeks from now. And then February, it's not listed here, but we're going to invite everyone to join us for a special Valentine's Day themed event where we're going to be sharing favorite tools and sharing the love, having some prizes, a little bit more fun themed stuff, kind of in the vein of our IT Festivus and IT Horror Festival, if you guys attended that. So just some things that are upcoming. But I see some questions here. So, oh yeah, Tess, happy birthday on the 16th, by the way. Okay, so not calculating. Well, Tina, we'll get you, we'll troubleshoot with the Excel doc for you there to make sure that the calculator works. We kind of ran out of time here, Chris, and you touched on this a little bit, but any other big picture kind of takeaways that you would leave people with around what we talked about today, maybe if you have anything you want to say about M&A trends in general, but if you want to keep it more focused about some of the things that you were talking about today, kind of closing thoughts, anything you wanted to add?
First and foremost, as I did mention before, selling does not mean exiting, does not mean leaving. It can, but it doesn't mean that. In many cases, it's about joining forces today. There's lots of smaller MSPs coming together. It's not just private equity buying big MSPs. If there's either an opportunity or a need that you might have, there are opportunities out there for you. I talked to a guy just 2 days ago. He's got an MSP that's under $100 million, or excuse me, under $1 million in revenue. Unfortunately, he's taken on some debt. He's a little bit underwater. He's like, do I have to do a payday loan, or is there something out there? And talked about some scenarios in which he might be able to join somebody, join forces, doesn't have to give up the whole business, retain some ownership, those types of things. So it doesn't mean exiting. There are opportunities out there for people, frankly, of all sizes. The other thing I'd say is, it is still a seller's market. The valuations are up in many cases as high as they've ever been. I don't know how much higher they'll go. Not forever, but there is opportunity now if you need it. The takeaway though is you're going to exit the business one day. Every business started differently. Once upon a time, insert your story. And they're all going to have a slightly different ending, but they're all going to end with the end. Be prepared for it. Start to put some time into it. It's not a morbid thought. It's not a failure thought. In fact, it's proactive and it's good business that you should be doing. So just pay attention to it. There's so much, again, information on there that's been great. Just pay attention. Have a call with a suitor. I gave one friend a piece of advice. You're probably getting more unsolicited phone calls and emails now than you ever have. You don't have to answer them, but build a bit of questions. Hey, Tom, thanks for reaching out and your interest about my business. I've got 3 or 4 questions for you but before we would have a conversation. I'm curious, are you private equity or privately funded? What are you thinking about doing with the owner? And what's your ultimate strategy look like? I mean, ask a couple questions. Educate yourself as the owner, what's going on, build some relationships, and just continue to, make a little bit of time to stay on top of it. I guess that'd be my takeaway.
I've got one thing real quick before we go. And yeah, as he touched on, there are second and third lives in the IT channel. I mean, I've now been with 2 different vendors over the last 5 years and do some MSP consulting. But as you're thinking about how you want to position your business for sale, also think about positioning yourself for that future and what's next for you in the channel, because it's a great way to stay on and stay with people and connected, and opportunities will open up if you position yourself the right way in the sale of your business.
That's great. Well, guys, thank you so much for the closing thoughts. Thanks everybody who stayed with us through the end here. We're going to get on the Excel doc to make sure that works for you. At the worst case, we'll share the link to the Google version, the Sheets version for you. But we'll make sure you have that, and the agenda doc is updated. You'll also get an email either tomorrow or at the very latest on Monday that has a link to the recording and everything, links to Chris, so where you can reach out to him. And we'll hopefully see everybody in a couple of weeks. But thank you so much, guys. Happy New Year. Here's looking forward to another year of doing these chats, staying in touch, seeing you guys. Let us know what you want us to be talking about, cover the topics that you're interested in. We got some great guests planned for all the way up for the next couple of months here. So really excited about what we're going to be giving to you guys, and just really appreciate the great community that everybody has provided us. I mean, Tom and I say this all the time. This is the most fun part of our job. So thank you everybody for making this such a cool series. Enjoy your day. Happy New Year. Chris, thank you so much for taking your valuable time to share with us. Really appreciate you too, sir.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, and take care, everyone.
All right.
Thanks. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.